Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast with hosts James McGarvey, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. Together, they make up the Church Safety Guys. Their mission? To inspire, influence, and impact church safety teams. Join us for the next hour as we talk about all things church safety and security. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, join one of our church safety and security communities online, and share this broadcast with your church.
Well, good evening and welcome to the night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am joined by my co-host this evening, Mike.
Hey, James.
How are you doing, sir?
Good.
It has been a long week.
Yep. That it has.
For sure.
I know you were a little under the weather and done some traveling yourself. And
yep, this is not the week for me to be sick. We have Vacation Bible School next week, so it's going to be an interesting week starting off already. For sure. But anyhow, if you're just joining us or you join us at a later time on YouTube or one of our podcast platforms, feel free to like and subscribe on that. You can click on that lower button on the right-hand corner, and then feel free to like and share our content with your church. And I'm looking forward to tonight. I look forward to every broadcast, but tonight we're going to be talking about church security and facility planning. And I know some folks might think or might be asking the question, well, how does this directly impact church security? And we've talked about doing assessments in the past and that sort of thing. But how this is different and why I think this is important is because a lot of churches, if they're changing their facility or if they are looking to start a church plant like we are in the Columbus area, oftentimes it's kind of nice to consult with someone or bring someone in to kind of talk about some of the opportunities ahead of time. And, for me, we've been running really very close to the same playbook at our church for the last 13 or 14 years. And so yesterday I had a brief conversation with our planting church pastor, and he said, you're going to be over church safety and security, and I want you to do it from the ground up. And he said his response was, that shouldn't be a problem because you can just copy what you're doing, what we do now, right, at this church and bring it over. And the more I started looking at it, the more I said, well, you know what? There's some stuff that I would do differently moving forward because it's not that that's bad things or anything, but it's like if you had a clean slate and you had 14 or 15 years experience of doing that, how would you do it different from, when you first originally did it? And sometimes it's easier to set policies and procedures before you get into it versus trying to change the tide of the ship, right?
Yep. Try to steer that.
So I've got a few meetings that I set up, and I've been able to dig into a lot of resources and really evaluate a lot of the stuff that we share with churches, including from Full Armor and some of their policies and procedures, and just looking at stuff folks have shared with our group and that sort of thing. And it's kind of opened my eyes a bit to some of the things that, we could change or do different, or maybe we don't want to change. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Right. Mm-hmm. But it's opened my eyes to a lot of conversations specifically about facility, like where do you put a children's ministry in a building? Do you install cameras right away? How does the flow of the building work and everything else? So it's definitely an interesting time for me going through that information. But I will throw it.
Interestingly, I'm in an interesting situation as well, where I am advising another church, and they have secured some land, and they're looking to start down the path of building over the course of the next 18 months. So they're starting through the discussions of requirements and architects and starting to get into that planning process and what that might look like, both from how do they utilize the land effectively, and
Sure.
I'm trying to assist them with looking at it through the lens of safety and security. Again, just like you said, certain policies, plans, things like that are better done up front. Same thing with a facility, is we can look at that in the design phase and not have to play catch up or adjust later because of going into a pre-built building that you then have to modify. But in this sense, it's a chance, clean slate right off the beginning, and say, hey, these are must-haves. These are considerations that you should have up front, and here's why. And so I've started to dabble in that world, as well as certainly the normal role in my home church. So many hats at the current time.
For sure. And that's kind of, it's interesting going back into that area, because, for the longest time, like I said, I've done safety at our church, and now, I'm stepping out, and the pastor is like, he's a good friend of mine, but his comment to me yesterday was, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't really know. I don't know yet, because I've done safety for so long, for the last, 13, 14 years, that I'm interested in, taking a step back. And he's like, well, you can take a step back, but I still want you to be the safety director. And I'm like, okay. So anyhow, without further ado, let's bring our guest in.
Sure. So tonight's guest, Tim Kuhl, we'll bring him in here. He's the founder of Smart Church Solutions, I guess formerly or co-known as the Kuhl Solutions Group. I know there's a little bit of a rebrand that I listened to there. There's a podcast that they have, and Tim is the author of several books. I was mentioning to him before we came on air this morning, is the only collection of books by the same author that comes in second from our Church Safety Guys books would be Mr. Tim Kuhl here. And so I'll hold those up right here, and got that library collected here and pouring through them as we speak. So Tim, welcome to the program. Why don't you get started and give a little bit more detail about you and your background and the company.
Thanks, Mike and James. It's great to be with you guys. Fair warning, I was a preacher's kid, so I can talk for the next 4 hours. So you just tell me when I need to shut up, and I'll do my best to adhere to the rules. But it's great to be with you all. A little background on myself. As I mentioned, was a preacher's kid, Christian college, got out of college, didn't quite know what to do, and then started following my father-in-law around building churches. And so I spent the first 24 years of my adult career building churches across the U.S. Had the opportunity to build about 5 million square feet of ministry facilities, which is really exciting. And around 2008, 2009, in the middle of a recession, which is a wonderful time to always start a new career, I was really burdened by churches that I went to that I had built in 4 or 5 years prior, that the buildings looked like they were 20 years old. Because churches generally just don't do a good job on taking care of their buildings. We call it the house of God, and then we try to treat it like a house and not like a complex commercial real estate investment. And so we moved, we still do a little bit of consulting with churches on master planning and building and whatnot, but the majority of our time is now spent helping churches think through what we've dubbed as facility stewardship. And I'm a firm believer that everything on earth belongs to God. Amen. And as such, we are stewards of God's to take care of the stuff he's entrusted to us. So we're basically, I mean, stewardship growing up as a pastor's kid always meant money.
Right.
You had a capital stewardship campaign. And so, you'd pull out every verse in the Bible about stewardship when you wanted to raise money. Well, what was it, 10, 15 years ago, the EPA came out with environmental stewardship and opened, I think, people's eyes that stewardship really just means you're taking care of somebody else's stuff. Mm-hmm. So if we're truly biblical stewards, we're taking care of God's stuff, and that includes his church buildings. So that's kind of the crux of who we are, as a company. Personal passion on that is I believe that everything has been entrusted to us. The reason why my last book, Mike, is called Entrusted. Yep. Is it's just that foundational thing of what we believe as a company.
That's great. Now, and with that too is maybe is Cool Solutions Group, is that the newer name or is that the older name and now it's Smart Solutions? I was trying to understand which was which.
Yeah, so Cool Solutions Group is still the legal entity.
Okay.
And it's what it was called originally. We, a few years ago, noticed a lot of brand confusion between Cool Solutions and our software product called eSpace. We'd go to a conference and people go, "Oh, you're the people that help with facilities." And then we go to another conference. "Oh, you're the software people." And then it was like they couldn't understand it. So we tried to come up with this umbrella of Smart Church Solutions that kind of houses both Cool Solutions. I can't tell which side my chest is on. Cool Solutions Group is kind of our consulting side, and then eSpace is our software side. So they're both kind of housed underneath of Smart Church Solutions.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
There you go.
I had to do that. I knew that was going to come out at some point, but that's great. No, it's wonderful to hear another person speak about the duty and the service and what's necessary within houses of worship, and whether it's yourself looking at it from a space and facilities perspective, or us looking at it from a safety and security perspective, is that it is a ministry. We are entrusted with a duty to both protect or to steward or protect a physical building, protect systems and structures and spaces and surfaces and things like that. And yet there's this overlap, if you will. I see the need for facilities reaching out with safety and safety reaching out with the facilities side. And there's a continual overlap, not just in the technology, but certainly in the fact that there are two ministries that are kind of coexisting together within the church buildings. And very often we see ministries almost as silos, that they're stuck within themselves, that they don't do that outreach within other teams, that they're not necessarily engaging well. And that's one of the areas that we've been talking about, is how do teams, safety and security teams, better engage the other ministries within the church. And so facilities is one of those areas. So tell us more about how you feel the facility side of things works with other teams within the church.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike, because what we've seen over the last several years is it's not just facilities and safety security, but IT becomes a massive part of that. If you're thinking about I asked a question, you guys may be familiar with the church IT network, and I asked their membership about a year ago. I said, how many of you as IT professionals have taken over responsibility for your card access systems?
Yep.
All of them said they had. What's happened is card access that used to be a facility component now has become an IT component, because if you don't have the right bandwidth, if you don't have enough pipe to handle the internet, there's a joint venture that has to be going on. Same thing with any other connected devices within your building. If IT's not involved, security and facilities are going to be in real trouble.
Yeah, and only as strong as that weakest link or that weakest connection.
Exactly. Yeah. If you only have a 50 megabyte internet connection, you're trying to run Wi-Fi thermostats, and you're trying to run IP cameras, you're trying to run, you name it, you're going to run into trouble. And so then you have to take all of those technical, what I'd consider those three entities, facilities, safety, security, and IT as the technical side. And now how do you marry that into the, how do I say this nicely, the touchy-feely person side? Okay.
Yep.
You know, if security and safety is really an important thing for your church, then are you willing to tell that 30-year veteran in the nursery that she can't serve unless she gets a background check? You know, so how do you properly communicate without damaging people? And how do you convey messaging? Because I think we all would agree that the security system and the facility and the IT system is not the church.
Correct.
They are merely tools within the church to help fulfill a function of the church, which is the three of us and all the body of believers is the church. And so how do we then make sure that we don't let our myopic thinking, I mean, I'll go to a conference and I'll let people know, hey, as far as I'm concerned, you can fire your pastor and save the budget money for the facility. You know, obviously tongue in cheek, because I'm myopic in my thinking on facilities. But also being a preacher's kid, I know that the building will never save a soul.
Right.
The building will never disciple a believer. I do believe that it plays a big function in accomplishing those tasks, but in and of itself, it cannot accomplish those tasks. So safety, security, facilities, IT, we are supporting casts to the rest of the staff. At the same time, we're also not the redheaded stepchildren.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I just wanted to jump in real quick here because I know what you're saying. We, from a church perspective, the church that I've gone to, I think we're 57 years now, and we're on the second pastor. And so it's interesting because every time we roll something out, like we had a family invest in safety and security, and they wanted to help the church when we decided to add access control for sake of key control and monitoring who was coming and going and that sort of thing. And some of the reactions we initially had to members that had been going there for years, that everyone had a key, everyone could come in and go whenever they wanted to. The reality was we couldn't be good stewards. Stuff was turning up, disappearing, stuff would break, stuff would disappear, all of this stuff. And when we rolled out this new process of let's put some access control doors in and kind of beef up that system and be more, I guess, a better steward over key control and that sort of thing. The reaction that we got and the pushback from individuals that had been going there for years could have been a train wreck, right? Because everybody, if you change something just a tiny bit, just a little smidgen, all of a sudden, that can really mess up somebody's world. But how we communicated it, like when we actually sat down, we talked about a strategy and saying, okay, how are we going to explain this to the congregation? How do we roll this out? How do we nicely address that with the individuals that could have, potentially had an issue with it. And, the end result was that it was a far more successful rollout because people understood the value and the importance of taking care of stuff. It wasn't just hey, we want the new IT or the new, state-of-the-art technology in our building. It was, okay, we communicated that and really spent the time doing that. So
you think, James, when my dad was pastoring and I was growing up, it wasn't uncommon for our 4th, 5th grade classroom to be right next to an adult education classroom that was then next to a senior adult education classroom on a single corridor, double loaded in both directions with no check-in. Well,
right.
in today's society, whether we like it or not, your first-time guests with small kids are going to expect there to be a check-in, a security checkpoint, that their child is going to be safe when they drop them off.
For sure.
Mike, you mentioned about, as you guys start thinking about your new building, one of the key factors for us when we're looking at designing buildings is a centralized kids check-in, no adults allowed without the proper, security beyond that point. And I prefer a single check-in, not or at least a single check-in area, not a grade school on this end and nursery on that end, because from a first-time guest experience, I want to go to one place, check in all my kids, even if they go down 2 different corridors after they get through the security area. And those are just things that you want to try to do for people. Or even a mother's room. It used to be the mother's room was behind the glass at the back of the sanctuary that everybody could still see through if the lights were wrong. We're starting to suggest to people, do your mother's room at your nurseries, but put it on the outside of the security area, so that they don't have to, if they need to, if they've come from the sanctuary with a child, they don't have to get into a security area. Or if they've been paged to come, they can get the child at the security area, take care of them outside the security area, and then return them to a secured area, and you've not breached any security at that point.
Absolutely. That kind of describes our current setup.
Ours too.
My home church is, we have both a single central check-in for the children's area, and that's a control point. That's where, from a safety security perspective, we can staff that so that the input, as people are checking off, that nobody's going out the indoor, if you will, that they're checking people in, and then we have a single exit door from there as well. So they check them in. The workers take them over down the hallways. It does split to the multiple classrooms at that point, but that entire wing is under a single door, essentially. One door in, one door out, separate doors. And so we're able to staff it accordingly. So at pickup time, they're checking all the numbers and making sure, so no child is released even from their classroom into the hallway without that check. But beyond that, we have it staffed to make sure that no one's coming in the outdoor, that no kid pulls a jailbreak and gets out from one of the workers, which we've had a few times. But adding that additional component. Now, you talked about the mother's room, same sort of thing, exactly as you said, Tim, is that it's accessible enough to those that are coming out of an auditorium sanctuary area, but it's still separate from where the nursery might be. And it's turned more and more into not just some place where we can pipe in the service from a audio video perspective, and so they can hear what's going on. It's not necessarily through glass, to your point, anymore, but it's almost become a lounge. So it's a space for them, whether it's a crying child, whether it's the mother wants to nurse there versus in the sanctuary. We don't require them to, but they could go there. They could change the child. They could just calm the child down if need be, but they're still getting that same environment, but it's secure as well. And so our security team will let somebody into that area, and so that has its own space, but again, separate, creating those distinct environments.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great because that sort of thing is what I'd love to see brought into the building design for this other church that I'm working with, is because that central choke point adds the ability to control. I mean, I've seen some churches where literally that you send them down the hallway, but they could just do a horseshoe and come out the other side. And so you got to staff it with 2 people if you don't have a control wall, if you don't have a single point of access. So the ability to staff it from a safety and security perspective is directly driven by the facility design.
Yeah, the likelihood of an active shooter is minimal in our world, even though it makes the news every time, and it's tragic when it does. But the reality is your security team is more likely to deal with an estranged parent or grandparent trying to take a child. And if you do not have that security point in place, you've made yourself susceptible. And what happens if you need to have 5 volunteers to handle all your access points to and from kids area, and 3 of them can't make it on a Sunday? Now you're even more vulnerable. It's just, to me, the better the design, the easier it is to staff. And so facilities can help drive staffing as well.
Are you, just out of curiosity, Tim, are you seeing a trend with, like, we've been trying to find a building to use for our church plant, and I'm just curious if you're finding a trend that individuals prefer using like a warehouse type setting and retrofitting it or converting it over to a church, or if there's a specific model or style that you're seeing in church building today as more, I guess, more of a preferred method for doing that.
Yeah, it's a great question, James. A lot of it is driven by economics.
Sure.
In today's wild construction costs, you could spend $350-$400 a square foot for your building, your site work, your FF&E, your AVL, your all your infrastructure stuff. Where if you can buy a building that's been abandoned or an old warehouse or shopping center or something, your TI, tenant improvement cost, might only be $125 a square foot because a lot of it's in place. Now, with that said, too often churches immediately think, oh, if I can go find an old grocery store, this will be the ideal place for me. And they go find this big grocery store with columns every 20 feet that you have to work around, with only 17 or 18 foot ceiling heights, which are great for your kids' spaces and maybe lobby, but not great for worship. And so you have all of these, other things that kind of become problematic. Then it's like, well, yeah, it was a grocery store, okay, but does it have enough electricity to handle today's modern AVL system?
That's a good point.
If it's got air conditioning, that's great, but retail or commerce HVAC is different than assembly requirements. You got to have fresh air intake in return, and so on and so forth. Yep. And then how about sprinkler? If it seats more than 300 people, and in the states that you two are in and that I'm in, the way they calculate seating, if you're going to use chairs, it's basically 7 square feet per person. And so any auditorium bigger than 2,100 square feet has to be fire sprinkled.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, that's great. But now all of a sudden I've got to spend $7-8 a square foot just to sprinkle this building that I thought was a deal. And then is there enough parking? Is there, it goes on and on and on and on. And pretty soon you got to ask the question, am I better off to start from scratch?
Yep. Certainly sometimes I would think, I mean, in our situation, we're working with, they bought land. So it's going to be from scratch, whether we like it or not, for this specific location. And it presents unique challenges in that sense. I know we're coming up at the half hour or so here. James, anything else you wanted to catch right here? Or do you want to go to break?
No, I'd say so far so good. Let's take a quick sponsor break, and then we will come back and be right back with you. Right back with you. So don't go anywhere.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance & Associates, your partner in service.
Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast.
Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to help inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. We're protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over the United States through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and products. Help us reach more churches in impactful ways by considering becoming a monthly ministry partner. $2, $5, $20 a month will help us continue to provide these resources.
Welcome back to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. We're talking tonight with Tim Cool of Smart Solutions Group, and we've been unpacking a bit about how facilities is important, in not just to your church, but to the world of safety and security. And so I want to continue on that thread, Tim. If you could talk about some other thoughts of what you've seen in the churches that you've engaged with, and I know it's hundreds, and I think you may have even, your last book said 1,000. So tell us some more about what you see as the overlap, perhaps from a facility and a safety security of what do you want to look for in your building if you're starting from scratch like we're looking at, and perhaps planning for a new building. What elements do you want to make sure to focus on, or as part of that plan up front so it doesn't burn you later?
Yeah, so one of the things that churches think that they're doing themselves a favor by not implementing, and they're actually hurting themselves, is evil hates the light. And when you're thinking about a building, whether it's an existing retrofit or a new construction, make sure that your parking lots, your walkways, and buildings are well lit. And with the inexpensive LED as far as your utility bill, there's no reason why your lighting shouldn't be on all night. Yep. Avoid those hiding places, with high shrubs and stuff around your building as well. And, so those are just practical things that, frankly, in a lot of ways, just don't cost you any money. Mm-hmm. They're just smart to do. And so even some of your inside lights with LED lights, there's no reason why some of your foyer areas shouldn't be lit, all night. The other thing, I love that you guys are called Church Safety Guys and not necessarily Church Security Guys, because there's parts of safety that are related to buildings that we often overlook. Number one is, whether churches like it or not, we are subjected to OSHA.
Yep.
Okay. So if you're going to have a building and you're going to have a man lift, have you trained your people how to use it? Do you have the chain guard on it to keep it safe? Does every one of your ladders have a weight limit sticker still on it? If not, you could be fined by OSHA if they came by and did an inspection. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing about OSHA? Should someone on your staff be at least 10 hours certified in OSHA training? People say, well, why? Well, again, it's a complex commercial building, and sure, there are some things that apply. And while it's maybe highly unlikely that OSHA will just do a pop-in visit once you're in your building, if you have a neighbor that doesn't like you very well, or someone at your church is disgruntled and has left, and they decide to make your life miserable, and they call Ocean and say, hey, you should see the way those guys get on ladders and run their lifts and everything. You need to go do an inspection. It could make your life miserable. The other two areas that we find churches do a very poor job on maintaining after they move in is their AED batteries and their first aid kits. So we do inspections of churches. We do several dozens a year where we go and do facility condition assessment. And the three areas that we see most often out of date is the fire extinguisher, the AED battery, and the first aid kits. I mean, I've seen first aid kits where everything has been 10 to 15 years expired, or AED batteries that have absolutely no juice at all. So put it into perspective. Someone is having a heart incident in your church, and your first response team has been trained on how to use an AED. So they go and grab the portable AED, they bring it to the location, they unwrap it, they get it all ready, and nothing happens. And that person maybe dies.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for that? The church will be liable for having equipment that was not functional. And so we can't just think in terms of only security, but these are components of our building that need to be updated. You do not want to have someone grab a fire extinguisher and have it just peter out because it's not properly charged. Those things, your fire marshal should be checking those every year anyway. But I've seen in rural areas where sometimes it goes 2, 3, 4, 5 years before the fire marshal makes it around. And so we've got to be on top of that. We also need to be very aware of cybersecurity issues. Most churches now have internet and multiple internet connections. They maybe have a staff connection, a volunteer connection, a cafe connection, and you name it, and so on and so forth. What are you doing to secure people's identity and people's access in your building? And what are you doing to protect attacks on your building? When I'm designing the building also, Mike, one of the other things that I find important is rethink how many exterior doors you're going to have. There's a couple things that happen, and you guys know this better than I do, but the more doors you have, the more escape routes you have, the more break-in points, because frankly, the doors and windows are your weakest point of entry in any building.
Right.
Most people don't break through brick to get into your building. They go to a door or a window.
Right.
But you then think of the cost of putting proper card access. If you've got 50 exterior doors, that's an expense you don't need. And when you're thinking about escape routes for kids and other people, now all of a sudden you've created even a more opportunity for people to escape. And as a first-time guest, if I pull up into your parking lot and I see 50 doors and it's not real obvious which one I go into, it's likely I'm going to go from door to door and grab the wrong one and try to get into the building, particularly if it's during the week and there's not a mass of people going into the facility.
Yeah.
One of the other things, and this is going back to the discussion about the master planning and site plans, is church architects and church civil engineers too often fail to remember that a church is an event venue. That sounds a little crass, but at its nature, it's a venue that has events at it. And you think about places like a ball field, a professional ball stadium, you think of Disney, you think of other event venues. One of the things they don't have is something that we refer to as the river of death, which is that ring closest to the building where the cars are zipping by as people are trying to leapfrog from the building to their car.
I deal with that every Sunday.
And people do that because, we want to drop off Granny at the front door. Well, there's other ways to handle that. And so most of your event venues have an outside ring that then you pull down into and then have pedestrian walkways to the building so that it's a safe passageway from the parking lot to the building and back and forth. And so anything you can do to avoid the river of death in your parking lot, so people don't have to play Frogger to get to their cars. That's an advantage.
It's funny you say that, because for the last, 8 or 9 years, every Sunday I've done traffic control with one of our officers that him and his family attends our church. But every Sunday, religiously, we've gone out. He and I have gone out, because that's how our building is. You have about 150,000 square foot church building, and on each side of the church building is a awning for people to pull up and drop folks off. Well, then on the other side of that awning, you have the driveway and all the parking. So what happens is, every Sunday, people come and kids will come running out the side of the building while we're directing traffic to exit onto our main street. And it's taken quite a bit of time to train people to actually stop at the awning and wait for direction, because, people are leaving the parking lot on their phones, and not paying attention. And, even with the officer and I standing there with, green fluorescent vests on and clothing, they're still not paying attention. So that is a really good point.
The whole idea of the parking lot is something that I'm fairly passionate about. Is I think every church should have a parking lot ministry, and I don't call it a parking lot team. It's a ministry. I don't care if your church is 50 people or 50,000 people. There's huge benefits. Number one is it puts together or conveys we care enough that we're going to meet you in the parking lot. We care about your safety. We care about the flow of traffic. We want to give you a smiling face when you pull in. There's just all this. And that is actually your first, in my opinion, and I'm not a security expert like you guys, but that's your first line of defense. You see somebody getting out of their car wearing a trench coat in Austin, Texas in the middle of July, that's probably somebody you need to go chat with before they make it to the building.
Absolutely.
And so it serves multiple functions. But give you just a little story. So I was part of a church plant back in the 80s, and we worshiped in a gymatorium, sanctinasium, whatever you want to call it. And so the deal was I was in my 30s at the time. I won't tell you how old I am now. But the deal was on Saturday morning, there was about 20, 25 of us that played basketball in our sanctinasium. And then we would set up the chairs and then go home. Well, the church eventually built a sanctuary with pews. And they didn't need us to set up the chairs anymore. And we lost something as a group of guys, because that group of guys, you'd show up for basketball, then you'd be setting up the chairs. You'd be saying, wait, how was the football game at the high school on Friday? How you guys doing? How was life this week? Where'd you travel to? You slap each other on the butt and, all the stuff guys do. When they didn't need us to set up anymore, that group basically dissipated. That was really my small group. If that church could have thought about, and I wasn't smart enough at the time to suggest it, if they could have said, hey, why don't you guys go serve in the parking lot? And here's some really cool green and orange vests and some neat little things and, so on and so forth. We probably could have kept that group together and continued a ministry that, frankly, you don't want me to serve in your nursery. Okay. My wife and I had triplets. I'm done. Okay. So there's no more nursery duty until there's grandkids. And, but I would have happily served in the parking lot as a way to serve in a more manly kind of way that would have served multiple purposes for our church.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot on the show about the power that the parking lot can be, not just as a ministry, but to your point, that ring of protection, if you will, that extra set of eyes where they can alert the safety team early on, where they can engage the public as they're arriving and creating that welcome environment. And circle back to something you said at the beginning, Tim, is that's where safety and IT and facilities, we're all about creating or facilitating an environment that creates an opening for church, that creates that opportunity for community and discipleship and engagement. Each one of our teams plays a role in creating that environment, whether it's making sure the trash is taken out, making sure somebody has a parking spot, making sure nobody needs medical attention or needs an AED, or there's a threat of some sort. There's so many different layers to it that's part of it. I want to pick up something that you mentioned earlier as well on the OSHA component. And we do talk very heavily a lot in the world of security. And I think that's very much the attention that this industry is getting, is more towards the security side. We like to take the umbrella as safety. But to your point, there is many things there: slips and trips, curbs that are crumbling, lighting that goes out, poor paths, as you said, to people's cars. There's numerous layers that I think aren't necessarily thought of either by a facility side of things or even by the safety team or security team, because it doesn't necessarily jump to top of mind. And so these are things that you talked about it, Tim, through assessments. We talk about it as doing a facility walk, not just on a regular basis. Every time I arrive at my building, I loop the building first in the car and see what I'm able to notice driving around the entire perimeter of the property. But then I do my rounds as I get into the building on Sunday morning. And I'm looking for things that are out of place. What doesn't belong there? The number of times I walk through a stairwell and it's covered with a whole bunch of debris or different things that was on its way out that never made its way out to the dumpster. And now you got a primary egress route that's blocked up. And so it's that responsibility of joint ownership, I think, sometimes between those, that if you're in a church that has the benefit of having either a full-time facility team or a person at least designated in that way, or even a volunteer team that assists with those duties to cater to the events that are going on there in the weekend. Those different things, you got to have that joint responsibility. So you got to have communication between those safety folks and those facilities folks and say, hey, did you catch that? Or did you notice this? Or did you notice that? And the more there is that communication across, the more they can stay on top of it. So I know you were talking earlier too, Tim, about that stewardship, that responsibility of taking care of the building. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that side of things and how you truly see it as that a duty for stewardship?
Yeah, so churches will spend millions and millions of dollars to build a building. And too often they don't think about what is the cost of owning a building. So there's a big difference between the cost of building a building and the cost of owning a building. When you look at the cost of owning a building over a 40-year period of time, which is generally the time frame that's used in commercial real estate, anywhere from 70 to 85% of the cost and money spent over that 40-year period is attributed to operations. Only 20% or less is attributed to the actual sticks and bricks to get it built. And yet we too often gravitate to the new shiny thing. We get all excited about the new red carpet and the white steeple and, you know, all the things that we're going to do with the new building. And we don't properly plan for what's it going to cost us to take care of the building and to steward it long term. Most churches we work with are grossly underfunded in their general maintenance budgets. Most churches in America are grossly underfunded in their capital reserves. And it gets worse and worse because when you don't fund general maintenance the way you should, you get this kind of maintenance that everyone should avoid, which is called deferred maintenance. And deferred maintenance grows exponentially over time. You can take, let's say you walked around a window, Mike, when you were doing your inspection. Let's say you're the facility manager and you see caulk at the outside of the window separating. Where's water going to go?
Right there.
So you can spend about $2 at Home Depot and get caulk and fix that, or you can wait until the drywall on the inside of the wall turns black from mold, and you'll spend tens of thousands of dollars to fix something that $2 would have fixed.
Yep.
That's deferred maintenance.
Sure. And it's interesting too that you mentioned some of that for the listeners that are still kind of scratching their heads over a discussion of on facility type things. Many of the churches that many of the churches that I've gone to, safety, security, facility overlapped everything so closely. You know, the individual that was responsible for facilities was also responsible for, you know, doing 10 other functions. So, and actually, if Paul was with us tonight, you know, he would be able to bring up stories of when he was doing the maintenance stuff as well as security and safety and that sort of thing. But it's definitely an interesting topic. So we very much appreciate you joining us tonight. And if you, I guess if you had one focus for somebody that was looking at that, or one final thought for someone that was looking at starting or building their facility, starting their church, that sort of thing. Tim, what would your thought be on that?
Yeah, two thoughts, James, right off the bat. Number one is, before you actually break ground, make sure you've counted the cost of what it's going to cost to operate the building.
Sure.
I had a church, no joke, a church in Nashville that brought me in after they moved into the building, and the pastor was so upset that they built 60,000 square foot, and he couldn't understand why the utility bill went up.
Okay.
Okay.
That's awkward.
yeah, count the cost before you actually build the building. Let's start there. The second thing is, if you can't afford to do all the things that you ultimately want to do, whether it's AVL, security cameras, door access, put the infrastructure in when you're building. It's a lot cheaper to put conduit in now than it is to tear drywall out later. And Absolutely. So what I suggest is that churches have an AVL, an FF&E, an IT master plan in place. What is the ideal system that we would want in this building, even if we can't afford it today? And let's either run conduit, or let's run the Cat 6 cable, or whatever we need. Let's get it in place now. We can buy the hardware later.
For sure. And I can attest to that too, because we're running, when we install cameras in our building, we're running, you know, Cat 5 cable up through the drop ceiling, and we're finding coax and everything else that's been there for the last 50 years that people have run through that. I think it was about 6 years ago when we added on to our facility, we added a metal building for basically extra classrooms because our church was growing and everything. When they went to do that, one of the first things that was discussed was, okay, from a security standpoint, you know, what do we need to know? And the individual that was actually over the security team at that point said exactly what you just said. I want to be able to run conduit and run cameras and everything now, because I know even if we're not using them, you know, 5 years from now, we're going to come back and we're going to say, we want new cameras, we want this or that, and we want to be able to update the system. And that was for my job today, that was probably one of the best things, because every time I deal with the camera system, you know, it's just 10 times easier. So thinking ahead and looking at it from a standpoint of, you know, not today or tomorrow, but, you know, even 5 years from now, what do you envision your ministry? What would the capacity of the building be? What would the building be used for? All of those things I think would be really great to keep in mind, for sure.
Absolutely.
Tim, why don't we take this last minute here if you want to kind of plug. I can hold up the books individually if you want to give a quick 30-second talk about it for you. Give the folks at home an understanding of what they get going into that, and then how to reach out and contact you if they're so interested.
Yeah, so you can go to smartchurchsolutions.com, and in our resource section, we've got I guess we've got about half a dozen to a dozen ebooks, free ebooks and downloadables. And then you can also access my books. They're also available on Amazon. One of the other sources similar to what you guys have is we have a Facebook group called Church Facility Management Solutions. We've got about 1,100 people involved in it. And when we started it, it's only been up for about a year. But when we started it, I thought I would have to seed all of the questions and feed it constantly. And the last 8 or 9 months, I just sit back and watch all the conversations. And so, frankly, I'm learning as much as they are because these guys are practitioners. And don't tell anybody this, but I'm a theorist. I've never served as a facility manager, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once. And so, reach out to us at Smart Church Solutions. We also have a conference coming up in September. It'll be a 2-day virtual conference that you can learn more about on our website. But yeah, I just really appreciate the opportunity, James and Mike, to be with you guys today, and appreciate your heart and passion for the combined efforts of facility and safety and security.
Absolutely, this was great. As it's rare that we get folks that are also authors, are also out there with a ministry mindset as well. And so, I mean, we've had a few on here, and it's always a great conversation to get other folks that are in that world. So certainly amazing to have you on. I know you mentioned Nathan is in Belton. I just looked it up. He can't be more than an hour away from me. And so maybe there's an opportunity in the future if there's a desire to talk safety and security in your world of your podcast. I could drive up, or we could join virtually. But that would be great. Well. So thanks so much, James. You want to pray us out?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and we always just close in prayer, and then we'll call it an evening. So, gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you for tonight. I thank you for Tim and his ministry and the hard work that he's doing to just teach your truths. And Lord, I just ask that you would be with him and put a hedge of protection on him and his family as he ministers for you. Bless us this week and just be with us as we go about our daily activities, and bring us safely together again next Sunday night. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So I will, real quick, before we wrap up, I would just say we have one more week for the early bird special for purchasing the Church Security Essentials Conference tickets. That's actually good for the rest of this month. So if you purchase a ticket, basic regular admission ticket, then you would actually get a free Church Safety Guys book. And we still have tickets available. So that's October 2nd in Columbus, Ohio. You're welcome to join us. And you can get more information on the speakers and the venue and different things in the area on our website. You can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And other than that, feel free to like and subscribe to our channels. And if we can ever help you, or if there's anything that we can ever do to coach you or help you get through a situation, please reach out, and we would love to do that. So, Mike, anything else you want to add to that, sir?
No, it's great. It was another great episode. Some good gold nuggets in there.
Unpacked some great stuff.
I was just going to say we didn't get to say unpack as many times as we normally do, but that normally is Paul's job to count those. So
yeah, for sure. And I would say, again, just keep Paul in your prayer. He's still feeling under the weather, and I know he wants to get back with us, but we've kind of told him to chill and and get better first. He's been hit pretty. Him and his wife have been hit pretty hard with a cold and flu. So, but other than that, we will be with you next week, next Sunday night. So have a great evening. God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.
thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Looking for ways you can help us reach more churches? Share our broadcast with your teams. Consider becoming a monthly ministry partner. Like and share our page and join the discussion in our Facebook groups. Visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for other great resources. Remember to keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.